Hi, this is Rick from the channel you know as Zom Games. Today I'll be covering the ship known as SS Keewatin. Now, why is she in Kingston in the first place? Well, to be honest, the people who run this ship here just moved her here. So that's a whole new political stuff that we'll probably get into sometime in the future in the YouTube channel. But for now, we'll be talking about SS Keewatin, where she came from and how she was built. She was originally built in Scotland and moved here into Ontario, Canada. She operated in the Great Lakes for a long amount of time till the 60s. She had a sister ship called the Assiniboia, but it sunk and burnt down. But I guess that's how history does it. I guess they just burn ships down sometimes. But her sister ship was originally supposed to be a discotheque, but that never materialized since she sank. And now here is where her sister ship, the Keewatin, now resides in Kingston. Now we traveled a long way here. We were originally gonna go to Port McNicoll where she originally resided, but they moved her here to Kingston instead. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the video to me touring this ship. So let's go ahead. Now, SS Keewatin is mostly referred to as the Titanic or so-called Titanic, last Titanic era ship to still be around, but that's actually false. SS Nomadic and some Australian ships still exist. I think one of them is called the Baranga or something, I forgot. But she sank recently, so she doesn't really count anymore. But Keewatin here is still afloat and is technically a ocean liner, passenger ocean liner, but is actually a Great Lakes passenger ocean liner instead of an actual real transatlantic ocean liner. But she did theoretically go across the Atlantic just to get through Canada. So technically, yes, she is a ocean liner. Now, by how she got through the locks, back in the day, the locks weren't big enough to accommodate her, so they had to actually split her into like 3 different pieces so they could actually fit her through the locks. But now, since the locks are bigger and wider than before, they could actually fit the whole entire ship and all of its beam and length across the Great Lakes, all of the 3 Great Lakes it had to go through. That includes Lake Erie, Ontario, and so on and so forth.
Now, I found this really cool model of the SS Assiniboia before it got refitted to the way how Keewatin looks now. I didn't take a video of much of the model, but it is really detailed and really cool.
If you can see that on camera, the paint underneath the waterline is peeling off, and of course it's actually rusting underneath, so that's a really bad sign for a ship as old as basically even older than the Titanic itself at this point, which is, it needs to be refurbished. So this would last a lot longer than all of the other ships we have so far. And we can see right there, you can start to see its rib cage supposedly, and the metal there is probably quite thin by now, so it probably needs some desperate repairs before this thing actually, sinks by itself, because it really needs it.
Now, this section of the YouTube video, I had to actually mute the video itself because the tour guide personally asked me to actually mute the video if I am going to post it online. Now, with that being said, I will be doing some casual voiceovers on what we did on the ship itself during the tour. So right now we are currently outside of the ship. The tour guide is explaining how it is Titanic basically and is last Titanic era ship, but in my personal opinion and several others' opinion, her interior was more inspired of the Artemis Lusitania's interior. Now, sorry for the shaky camera, but in front of us here is the purser's office where they would hand out all of the keys to everyone's staterooms. As you can clearly see, there are a lot of keys there, and of course I went to go inside and see what's up and do a close-up on what they have in store there and room numbers, room keys, etc. It's a really tight and claustrophobic space, so if you plan on going inside the purser's office, keep that in mind. Now here we see is an old photo of SS Keewatin and also a secret door over there which opens up to a unfinished area of the ship which people are actually working on, since this ship is actually getting refurbished. Now we move to the Winter Garden, which is clearly inspired by RMS Lusitania. Now, a little fun fact about SS Keewatin's Winter Garden, it was called the Swamp because when people actually try to water the plants, water would end up moistening up all of the carpet and it'll be really uncomfortable to be walking around on moist and soggy carpet. Now, the carpet there was so badly decomposed that they actually had to strip the original carpet off of the ship and actually install a new identical replica of the original SS Keewatin carpet.
After the Winter Garden, we were swiftly escorted back to where we just came from, as you can currently see. But on my way back, I encountered this really cool and also original piano from 1907, from what they said or told me. And nobody's allowed to play on it. I was gonna play some music, but they told me to not play on it.
So I did what I was told.
We were then swiftly escorted upstairs where I took this glorious shot of the Winter Garden. And then I proceeded to go up the stairs and also trip and fall like an absolute idiot. Aside from that though, I managed to get myself up and also tour around the boat deck. Now the tour around the boat deck was rather limited, but I'd rather get a tour of the boat deck even if it's just a little bit of it. Now I got to see the famous black and yellow funnel of the SS Keewatin, and I also did a little sneak peek of the bridge from my position since I have a GoPro extender, and it was actually really nice up there. Now they didn't call it the boat deck though, they called it the sun deck. It is actually quite sunny that day, so it kind of did make sense on to why they called it the sun deck.
As for the reason why it was called the sun deck, it was called the sun deck because passengers at the time would set up shop at the very back or very front of the ship and basically tan their skin. Most took a stroll around the boat deck, but most mostly went to go take a stroll at the lower promenade deck.
Going back down to the Winter Garden, we actually got to see some first class rooms and suite in the ship, and they look very similar to what I saw in the Titanic or renditions of Titanic's cabins, and they are also very similar to second and third class cabins as well. So that's actually a pretty neat experience.
As for the biggest room on SS Keewatin, SS Keewatin's biggest room is actually the captain's room, which is actually under renovation when we were talked with the tour guide. So it's kind of sad that I wasn't able to take a peek at that. Little piece of history trivia for you. SS Keewatin actually had a divided smoking room or writing room on the ship. There was one for females at the very front and males for the very back. Now, I may have gotten those two mixed up, but that is actually quite standard for the time. Sometimes the male and females may swap places on where they actually want to be. So the females are at the very front, or the males being at the very back, or the males being at the very front and the females being at the very back. Now, on the Keewatin, they did not actually call these smoking rooms, but more or less the writing room, as it was intended to be a writing and drawing room for men and also women. Now, you may have just noticed that I am just frolicking around the very bow of the ship. And well, yeah, that is what exactly I am doing. As you can see, I look on the side of the SS Keewatin, and suffice to say, it gave me the heebie-jeebies. But most of the equipment on the SS Keewatin, such as where the mooring line is actually still functional to this day, though the paint is starting to peel off. Now, I am expecting them to actually repaint those on later in the refurbishment process. But the part 1 of this tour is just mostly about the upper parts of the ship, not the interior and engine room. Now, up next on the upcoming part 2 SS Keewatin video, we will be diving into the engine room of the SS Keewatin, where it is solely powered by reciprocating engines. And yes, they were massive. So, I hope you enjoyed this part 1 of the SS Keewatin video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the next one.